Good day, class. We are now in the last module for this midterm period. So, welcome to our Module 7 discussion. This is entitled Teleological Ethics. Allow me to define first what is teleology. Teleology comes from the Greek word telos, which means goal or end. So, it describes an ethical perspective which contends that the rightness or wrongness of actions is based solely on the goodness or badness of their consequence. So in other words, gaya nga ng sinabi ni Niccolo Machiavelli, the end justifies the means. So yung such action, masasabi nating good or bad yan, it depends on the consequences, or it depends on the outcome of the action. Okay, it is based solely on the goodness or badness of the result of a certain action. So that is teleology again, from the Greek word telos, meaning goal or end. In a strict teleological interpretation, actions are morally neutral when considered apart from their consequences. Ethical egoism and utilitarianism are examples of teleological theories. Again, as we have discussed in the previous module about utilitarianism. Okay, so again, if we say teleological or the rightness of action is determined solely by the amount of good consequences they produce. Okay? Depende doon sa amount ng good consequences they produce. That's yung rightness of action, ano, ay nakabase doon sa kung ito ay nakabubuti ba sa nakararaming tao. Okay? The work is derived from the Greek word telos, which refers to an end. Again, action is justified by the end. Okay? Yung action mo, yung ginawa mo, it is being justified by the result. Okay? It achieves rather than the features of the action. So, it is based solely doon sa result ng iyong ginawa or consequences ng iyong ginawa. Masasabi mong tama or good ang iyong nagawa, no? Base doon sa naging resulta. Masasabi mo ding masama or bad yung certain action na nagawa ng isang individual based solely on the consequences. Again, according to utilitarianism, our obligation or duty in any situation is to perform the action that will result in the greatest possible balance of good over evil. Whatever makes human beings better off is good. Obviously, it depends on what is considered as good or evil or pleasure or pain. It depends on person's own conception. In teleology, for Aristotle, the aim of ethics is to discover what is good for us as human beings, what permits us to reach our potential. So this is why we call Aristotle's ethics as teleological ethics. Again, kapag sinabi nating teleological, having to do with the design or purpose of something. So we, also as human being, we have that own purpose. We are designed for something. There is a purpose of our existence. Gaya ng bahay, a house is built to live in. Ano bang purpose ng bahay? Para tirahan ng family, ng tao. Then, ganun din ang orasan. It is made to keep time. Okay? So, according to Aristotle, the end or yung goal that human beings aspire to is happiness. That is our ultimate goal or end. Yung tinatawag nating happiness, or in Greek word, eudaimonia. So, teleology is the good at which all things aim. The aim or goal of human life is happiness. Just like the aim of medicine, di ba, is health. For shipbuilding is a ship. Sports game is for victory. That's the aim. No? The aim of any domestic economy is wealth, para magpayaman. So, ganun din ang buhay. Or the human life. The aim of human life is happiness. Just like the image, as you can see here, what goes around comes around. So the question here, do consequences make an action right? Many ethicists have argued that we should decide moral right and wrong by looking at the consequences of our actions. Again, it is based solely in our actions. If we talk about teleological ethics, yung consequence ba, na-justify ba nito yung isang action, kung tama ba or hindi? Nagagawa ba nitong na-justify ba nito yung outcome? Na-justify ba niya yung isang certain action, kung ito ay tama or mali? No? If the consequence, it says here, if the consequences are good, the act is right. So it justifies. It answers the question that do consequences make an action right? Of course, yes. If the consequences are good, then we can say the act is right. If the consequences are bad, the act is wrong. Okay? So, consequentialist theory measures the morality of an action by its non-moral consequences. They consider the ratio of good to evil that an action produces. So, class, as we have mentioned, or as I have mentioned, consequence, ano nga ba ibig sabihin nito? Again, if we say consequence, it is what naturally, you take note of that, naturally, follows after an action. The result of a previous occurrence. So, ito yung resulta ng iyong action. Okay? Whether good or bad, may consequence or may kalakip na resulta yung ginawa mong action. That's the essence, or that's the meaning of consequence. It goes naturally. It follows naturally pagkatapos ng iyong ginawa. So in relation to the consequence, as I have mentioned doon sa previous slide, dito ngayon papasok yung consequentialism. So let us define what it is. It is a moral philosophical approach that looks at the morality of an action depending on the outcome. Yan ang consequentialism. In other words, yung action na ginawa mo, ay or in consequentialism, ito yung philosophical approach na tumitingin doon sa morality of your action. Depende doon sa outcome or the resulta. So that's consequentialism. Kung ano yung ginawa mong action, whether good or bad, ang focus ng consequentialism is yung consequence, yung outcome or result ng iyong ginawa. Again, consequentialism is a philosophical approach that looks at the morality of an action depending on the outcome. We have two principles of consequentialism. Number one, whether an act is right or wrong depends only on the results of that act. Number two, the more good that act produces, the better or more moral the act is. We have some forms of consequentialism. The first form is utilitarianism, of course. We already tackled this in the previous modules. No? Again, moral worth of an action is solely determined by its contribution to the overall utility or human well-being or human welfare. An act is right if it leads to the highest happiness of the greatest number of people. So in other words, the act is right kung ito ay para sa ikabubuti ng nakararami. Again, it supports equality and rejects any discrimination among individuals as to who is worthy of concern and who is not. Next form is ethical egoism. Believes human persons should do whatever is in the person's self-interest. So according to Henry Sedgwick, 1962, he argued that a certain degree of egoism will actually result to the general welfare of society sa ikabubuti ng nakararami, for the greatest number of people. So same is true with the utilitarianism. Ang focus nito is doon sa kabutihan ng pangkalahatan, hindi lang ng isang grupo, hindi lang ng isang tao. So this is the argument of Henry Sedgwick. He said, or he argued, that individuals knows best what is truly good for himself or herself. Number two, living for the benefit of others will cause a person to feel neglected and general welfare will decrease. Next form of consequentialism, we have ethical altruism. So it is in the person of Auguste Comte. He believes that individuals have a moral obligation to help or serve even at the expense of one's self-interest. No? Sabi niya, mayroon tayong moral obligation na tumulong at pagsilbihan yung ating kapwa. According to him, he coined the term altruism, and whose ethics can be summed up in the phrase, live for others. Okay? Kumbaga, mabuhay tayo para din sa ikabubuti ng ibang tao. Not only for ourselves. So that's ethical altruism. Next form, we also have the pragmatism. Ito ay hango sa Greek word na ang ibig sabihin ay work, practice, action, or activity. So, derived from the Greek word pragma. The philosophy that encourages people to find processes that work in order to achieve their desired ends. Okay? Next, pragmatists believe that reality is constantly changing and that we learn best through applying our experiences and thoughts to problems as they arise. Okay? So, meaning, pragmatism, again, It is the philosophy of practical experience. Based on our practical experience, we have, of course, we have experiences in the past. So we learn from that and we apply it in our present. Okay? Meaning it is a typical American philosophy, practical in approach. So that's pragmatism. Who are the proponents of pragmatism? So, originated as a philosophical movement. So, dati siyang, kumbaga, before ay ito'y isang kilusan in the United States in the late 1800s. So, ang mga proponents nito, we have Charles Sanders Peirce, we have William James, and John Dewey. So, they have that club called the Metaphysical Club. So, ano nga ba yung mga basic principles ng pragmatism? The first one, it gives importance to action. Okay? It gives importance to experience. Believes in changes. Or believes in change, yung pagbabago. No belief in permanent values. It gives emphasis on experimentation. So, ibig sabihin that they hindi masamang sumubok sa mga bagong bagay. A practical philosophy, a humanistic philosophy. Pragmatists believe on present. Again, believe that growth and development takes place through interaction and environment. Deep faith in democracy. Okay, that's pragmatism. It has a deep faith in democracy. It emphasis on means, not an end. Okay, so that's the pragmatism. Based solely on the means, not doon kumbaga nag-focus siya doon sa action, hindi doon sa result, hindi doon sa outcome. That's pragmatism. We have forms of pragmatism. We have humanistic pragmatism, we have experimental, we have nominalistic, and biological pragmatism. So humanistic pragmatism, this type of pragmatism is particularly found in social sciences. So according to it, the satisfaction of human nature is the criterion of utility. In philosophy, in religion, and even in science, man is the aim of all thinking. So it focuses on human. And everything else is a means to achieve human satisfaction. Next, experimental pragmatism. It is in modern science is based upon experimental method. The fact that can be ascertained by experiment is true. So it back up siya. It should be backed up by experiment to justify yung truthfulness. No truth, it says here, is final. Okay? Truth is known only to the extent it is useful in practice. So the pragmatists use this criterion of truth in every field of life. The human problems can be solved only through experiment. Just like for example, dun sa mga theory nila about humans, di ba? Next is nominalistic pragmatism. It says that when we make an experiment, we attend to the result. Okay? Focus naman ito doon sa result. Our aim is examination of the material. Some hypothesis about the results invariably precedes every experiment. According to nominalistic pragmatism, yung resulta ng experiment are always particular and concrete. So, matibay na ebidensya, for example. never general and abstract. Next is biological. Experimentalism of John Dewey is based upon this biological pragmatism, according to which the ultimate aim of all knowledge, okay, is harmony of the man with the environment. Kaya nga biological. Education develops social skill which facilitates one's life. The school is a miniature society which prepares the child for future life. So in biological pragmatism, no, may contributions diyan ang school, no, as part of our environment. Okay? Next, under teleological ethics, we also have practical ethics. This is another subtopic. Introduction to practical ethics, issues and philosophical concepts. So, what is practical ethics? It is an area of moral philosophy looking at the specific problems gaya ng euthanasia, war, medical research, and so on. So, under practical ethics, we have example like euthanasia. It is from the Greek word nang ibig sabihin na a good death. So, what are the types of euthanasia? Number one, we have active euthanasia. It is something is done to the patient to hasten the death. Okay? Not legal in the India. Okay? Legal in Netherlands and Australia. Examples, drugs are administered at lethal levels. Gaya, like for example, in the case of Leo Echegaray, noong may death penalty pa sa Pilipinas. So, may in-inject sa kanya, no, for death penalty. So, that is active euthanasia. Next is the passive euthanasia. Patient is allowed to die, okay? Only medication help is patient's pain is administered. Passive euthanasia is legal in India naman. Example nito, yung passive euthanasia, yung turning off respirator, kung yun na lamang yung bumubuhay sa kanya, yung machine na lamang for example, or yung oxygen na lamang is i-administer na itong passive euthanasia. Or kung limbawa may sakit ng cancer, ano, then the patient will refuse to chemotherapy. That is passive euthanasia. Next, we have voluntary euthanasia. Patient requests treatment to be stopped. Nag-request na yung mismong patient na stop na yung treatment sa kanya. Examples yung chemotherapy or dialysis. So, ang tawag yan is voluntary euthanasia. Then after that, of course, we know what will happen next. Next is non-voluntary euthanasia. Yung pasyente cannot decide from themselves. As we can see in the picture, yung isang bata halimbawa, no? Someone makes the decision for them. Sino yung nagde-decide for them? Of course, the immediate family, parents or mga kapatid. Examples, yung children or yung pasyenteng comatose. Yan. Ang nagde-decide for them is yung immediate family. Kung i-administer na yung euthanasia. So, ang tawag dun is non-voluntary. Or individuals not mentally competent. Okay? So, yung family, immediate family ang magde-decide. Sa case na yan, nangyayari din yan sa bansa natin. Next is voluntary euthanasia. Yung pasyente dito, patient is refuse a life-sustaining treatment. Yung patient na mismo ang nag-refuse Okay? May consent yung patient dito Sa non-voluntary, walang consent yung patient. Sa voluntary, conscious yung patient, galing mismo sa kanya yung consent. I-administer sa kanya yung euthanasia. Examples, drugs are too costly. Limited supply of organs. Halimbawa, sa kidney organ, walang makuhang donor. Or sa heart, for example. Then, about 13,000 patients are on waiting list in the US. Ganyan kadami. So that's non-voluntary and voluntary. Justifying voluntary euthanasia. Of course, it is carried out by a physician. Then the patient has explicitly requested euthanasia. Okay, mayroon silang consent. Okay, the patient's decision is well informed, pre and durable. It is not mandatory. Okay? The patient has an irreversible condition. Okay, ina-administer lang ang euthanasia sa mga patient na talagang wala nang lunas yung kanilang mga sakit. Of course, with their consent or with the consent of their immediate family. So, in conclusion, we can say that euthanasia is only justifiable if those killed either lack the ability to consent to death, okay, gaya ng mga comatose, or have the capacity to choose between their own continued life or death, and to make an informed, voluntary, and settled decision to die. That ends our discussion class for Module 7. Thank you so much and God bless. I hope may mga natutunan tayo to apply with real life situation. Thank you.